They're all.
Guess I'll sit on the second row.
This is like the DAC coffee.
It is.
Well, hey, good morning, and thank you all for joining us for our second to last Coffee with the Community. We just recently finished up our Liberty School District Foundation Community Breakfast and appreciate everyone that put the time and energy in putting off a successful event and really highlighting our elementary, middle school, and high school students in that experience. So appreciate our community partners that were in attendance as well. We wanted to share with you this morning a topic that's timely, and we have a few more weeks left before the April 3rd election, and have hosted a variety of meetings within our buildings at the staff level, but then also PTA events, community meetings, civic meetings. We've even put out a 30 Things to Know, and so hopefully you've enjoyed that. I think we're about a third to a half of the way through those pieces, and we'll continue to do that between now and April 3rd, highlighting a lot of different areas related to the no tax increase bond issue. This morning, we wanted to give you an overview of the work that we've been doing with the Board of Education over the last 2 years. And we reference it as a journey because it's been just that, in really diving into a lot of different areas to get us to where we're at today in working toward a no tax increase bond issue. But before we get into the specifics of that journey, we want to always start with our mission, vision, and values. And so as we reflect on that, you'll see things like future-centered. You'll see pieces that relate to being learner-centered, the future-focus piece, and you see the values that are associated with that. Of course, it's operationalized through our strategic plan and a couple of key goals. Every student will graduate college and career ready. Every student will develop personal, social, and civic responsibility. And then the ensuing critical commitments of a vertically aligned curriculum, instructional innovation, personal and social growth in a safe and secure environment, future-focused professionals, community partnerships, and collaboration, and then fiscal responsibility. From those pieces, really everything that we do in a school district can fall underneath those kind of 6 key areas. So as we think about that, think of where we're at today as a school, 12,614 students, and as we prepare for the future, the facilities that we need in order to provide programming and learning experiences to meet the needs of our growing student population. So that journey really started about 2 years ago with the Board of Education's help and going to the drawing board and looking at our debt structure and really how we manage our debt, given that we are continuing to grow as a school district, and how we can set ourselves up for future possibility of putting no tax increase bond issues on the ballot. So with that, we took advantage of some interest rates. We did some refinancing, some restructuring. In addition, that is really all driven by our financial well-being as a school district. At the local level, one of the main revenue streams is in our assessed valuation, as we take our property tax and apply it to the assessed valuations that we see across the school district in a couple of key areas that then generate our revenue. And so if you look at this particular graphic, we just surpassed about $1 billion in assessed valuation in Liberty Public Schools. It's comprised of these 4 key streams, that being personal property, commercial property, agricultural property, and residential property. And what you can see is there's a very small sliver right at around that 6 million mark, or 600 million mark, that shows agriculture. The remaining pieces, 78% of it is caught up in residential property and residential assessed valuation. To give you some added context, if you compare ourselves to some of our peers in the corridor on 152, in North Kansas City, they have an assessed valuation of about $2 billion, of which 55% of that is captured in residential property, and they have a student population of in and around 18,500 students. If you go a little bit further west to Park Hill, they have an assessed valuation of $1.5 billion, a smaller student population of around 11,600 students, and in total, their assessed valuation is made up of about 18% residential properties. And so in total, in Liberty Public Schools, we're truly a bedroom community. The reason why that's important is because those property levels, whether it's commercial, agriculture, or residential, residential are assessed at different rates. And so commercial property has the highest rate as it relates to revenue streams for a school district. We rely heavily on residential property in terms of our local revenue streams in Liberty Public Schools. A couple of historical pieces to look at as it relates to those valuations. We've seen years as high as 12 to 13, almost 14% back in the early 2000s. And then you can see where that dipped down considerably in around 2007 to 2009. In that we actually had some years where we had negative numbers showing up in terms of those percentage adjustments. And then we started to eke back up a little bit. From a budgeting standpoint, we budget for 2.5% growth annually, which we're excited about. But at the same time, we'd love to get back to some of those higher percentages. And you can see here of late, back in 2015 as well as 2017, we had some higher years beyond what we had budgeted for. In addition, in terms of that restructuring and refinancing, taking advantage of those interest rates, we were able to put forward for consideration on this April 3rd ballot a no tax increase bond issue. And we landed in 2018 at a dollar value of $49 million. We could, based on our existing bonding capacity, actually put forward a recommendation or a proposal to the tune of about $70 million because we've built up our bonding capacity through the work of the Board of Education, our continued assessed valuation growth, to be able to do that today. So fast forward, once the April 3rd election occurs, if our voters grant us that green light, so to speak, to move forward with the projects we've identified. We also believe that in the ensuing years, 2021, we could bring back potentially, these are just placeholders, another no tax increase bond issue to the tune of $50 million. So we will have built up our assessed valuation over the next 3 years to be able to come back possibly in 2021 with a $50 million no tax increase bond issue. But beyond that, we've also positioned ourselves by, let's say, 2025, if the need shows another bond issue in the works, we could come back with a $68 million no tax increase bond issue. So this amortization scale really kind of looks forward as to how we could be positioned with our continued growth based on those needs, and really it's to the credit of the work of the Board of Education. Our Chief Finance Officer and her team have done a tremendous amount of work in terms of getting us to this point. So shift briefly to the second piece and part of this journey, and that's in looking at enrollment projections and working with a demographer. So every few years we go back and consult with a demographer to kind of reiterate and look at a new demographic projection. And so we did that this last fall. Prior to that, we had done it in around 2015. And what we saw between the two demographic studies was initially a trajectory of anywhere between 3 to 3.5% growth. But then we've seen a slowdown in that over the last couple of years to where it's more between 1 to 1.5%. We'll talk about that here in a moment. So currently as it sits, we look at our September count, and that's what we file with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So for 2017, 2018, if you look all the way to the bottom right-hand corner, we sit at a student population of 12,614. That has evolved as the course of the year has kind of progressed. You'll also note that at the second to last line, that includes, at that point, 259 early childhood students. That number increases as well as the school year progresses. What's interesting about this piece, and we'll focus on kind of those middle grades, so in starting in 4th grade all the way through about 8th, 9th grade, you see larger class populations. That's an important piece because what we found from our demographic study is the classes that are coming behind that 4th grade population are considerably smaller, particularly when you start thinking about birth rates. And so declining birth rates then fast forward into kindergarten entrance and then matriculate through the system. And so if you start at 4th grade, you have class sizes across the entire district of about 1,028, 972, 1,035, and you can kind of see the graphic. But then if you back it out from 3rd, 2nd, 1st to kindergarten, you're more in that high 800s to 900 range. And so we're going to continue to watch that kindergarten enrollment and see how that plays out. Another interesting piece of data that we came across were purchasing patterns. As we look at the purchasing patterns of families in our community, what we see is younger families that typically would have, purchases as it relates to baby products, diapers, formula, and the like. We're starting to see a decline in that data that's available to us. And so as that particular data declines, we couple that with the birth rate we could really kind of confirm that trend as we look to our kindergarten enrollment. We'll continue to watch that. The next piece is really a historical look. And so from 2017-18, where we saw, you know, a little bit over 1% growth, all the way back to 1987, for those that remember those years. We had some years where we had percentage increases as high as 7%. We had lower years than that, but you can see where that really spikes in a couple of key years, particularly in the mid-1990s, and then again in the kind of early 2000s. We're going to continue to watch that, but the trend line, as you can see, continues to kind of hover in the middle, where it's gone from about 4.5%, where it's gone down toward 3%, and moving forward, we think it's going to be more modest growth annually from about 1 to 1.5%. So it slows down, but it's continued growth as compared to what other districts are experiencing in terms of loss of students, which then ends up being loss of revenue. And in some instances, dire instances, where districts are having conversations that are the complete opposite than ours in terms of how do we approach closing schools and consolidating in those difficult conversations. That is not the case in Liberty Public Schools. So from our demographic projection and working with business education services, we really had three ranges. We had a low trajectory, a medium trajectory, and a high trajectory. And so to quickly look through that, if you're following the low track, the green line, at its peak in 2022, 2023, that would then put us right at or close to the number we're at now with our pre-K population included, but 12,568. If you look at the medium range at its peak, really in and around 2024, 2025, you're hovering at that 12,967 range. And then if you look at the high trajectory, which gets us all the way out to 25, 26, that ends up putting us right at 13,484 students. So even on that highest trajectory, or that highest path, you can see where we've got a considerable amount of time, according to this projection, to be working toward that 13,484. As we talk about options toward the end of this presentation, the number that we kind of set our sights on was around 13,300, which really puts us out to 2022, 2023. The important thing to note is that we don't just follow this for the next 10 years. Instead, what do? We keep our ear to the ground. We talk with developers. We talk with the City of Liberty. We talk with the City of Kansas City. We look at building permits being issued across our entire footprint. We work with economic development. We do a lot of work behind the scenes to kind of keep up to speed or apprised of the development that's going on in our community, both residential as well as commercial, in terms of our growing school district. This will guide us for a couple of years, and then we will come back and continue to look at what those projections based on what could change. There's a lot that can happen, and the one thing that we've learned in doing this for the last several years is that demographers typically aren't very confident in looking beyond kind of that 5-year mark. There's a lot that can happen in that 3 to 5 year range, but there's even more that can happen once you start looking beyond that 5-year piece. So we'll continue to look at our actual enrollments from year to year, as well as continue to work with the demographic projections. The next piece is the long-range planning piece. So if you'll go back with me for a second from the last bond issue that our patrons approved and the projects that started immediately thereafter, we worked through those and getting those open at a couple of our campuses across the district. And then we went back to initiate the next long-range planning process. And it was really a 5-step process from starting the plan to ending on the option as far as what our long-range plan would look like. But the thing I want to focus on the most is really these three middle pieces. Collection of data information, developing planning criteria, exploring options. There was a tremendous amount of community engagement involved throughout each of these steps, but it really began with looking at data by going and visiting every single one of our schools. And so we utilized a facilities walkthrough assessment, a tool that architects often utilize and districts rely on, that went through and assessed the building in a couple of key categories. The school site in terms of the physical site, structural and mechanical features, plant maintainability, school building safety, environment for education, educational adequacy, and then also future-ready environments. In addition to that walkthrough assessment, we were able to solicit feedback from faculty and staff through an online survey. with some specifically structured questions, but at the same time some open-ended opportunities for staff to share what they viewed as their needs within every single school and campus. The result of that data collection is what you see here on the right. Every single building has a profile. And a couple of things to point out within that profile. The first piece is really related to that physical site. What's the floor plan look like? Is there opportunity to add on? Is there space? What are the building capacities? What's the current capacity in terms of their current enrollment? What's their, how big can that particular campus get in terms of the physical space? In addition, the scorecard reflected the building score and percentage as it relates to those areas that were assessed, which is valuable for administrators, for principals, and providing programming and really being able to see maybe some areas of strength, but then also some areas of focus as we looked at the campus and the school structure. The last piece really did capture the staff survey data and their comments, and we really kind of grouped those common themes that we were seeing out of each of the buildings. And then in this particular instance, this example with Liberty Academy, it shows in kind of that shaded orange area, it shows some additional locations within that campus or on that footprint for growth. And so we have some additional acreage across from the parking lot. There was plotted another section when this was previously a strip center where you could actually go in and build another structure and have 3 on that campus as compared to just the 2. We started with just 1, and then we finally purchased the entire location to be able to provide programming for our students at the academy. So every campus has this scorecard, along with all of the data that was collected in that survey instrument as well as the online piece. From that, we launched into a process with our community of looking at planning criteria. And so appreciate the help of our Vision 2020 committee in getting that process going, working with our architects to look at what type of a format we wanted to follow. And we landed on a placemat that was a series of questions, and I believe there were 17 or 18 areas we were looking at, as well as an opportunity for open-ended feedback. And the areas we discussed in planning criteria included, again, safety and security, next generation learning, grade configuration, what's the right size class in terms of student to teacher ratios, what's the right size school as it relates to an elementary school, a middle school, or a high school. How do we view the use of mobile units in terms of classrooms or trailers, which, by the way, the answer was you can only do it for a limited amount of time and then try to get those students into the building. We heard that frequently from our patrons and families. Special education, partnerships, early childhood, you can see other programs that are mentioned there. Mass customized learning as it relates to innovative learning and different approaches and how we meet the needs of our 12,614 students. From the planning criteria, the Board of Education was able to take that data and information and then look at a variety of options. And we won't go through every 9 of these, but you can see that they all look a little bit similar, but there's differences as you look at feeder patterns, which are predicated on the enrollments that you would plug into each of these options. So starting with our existing structure, but then also looking at, okay, what's it look like when we hit that 14,000 mark, or that 16, or 18, 19, 25,000 for that matter, if and when we get there. So from these 9 options, we really honed in on, okay, what are our demographic projections telling us? Keeping in mind we used that high trajectory that by 2023, 2024, we were looking at that 13,300 mark. And so that's where we landed in terms of this particular option, Concept B, which keeps feeder patterns for the most part as they are currently. With a focus on a couple of key elementary schools that we still see a little bit of growth or pinch and kind of reaching their capacity. We're going to watch that over the course of the next couple of years, but continuing to see how that kind of matches the demographic study that we conducted. You'll notice also in the middle there's kind of a golden hexagon, and that golden hexagon is the number of students that we have at the high school level that have experiences outside of the classroom. And so today, for example, on Thursday, March 15th, we have approximately 450 students throughout the course of the day that will have some type of experience outside of a traditional high school classroom. Whether they're participating an hour or multiple hours in an internship program, or whether they're a Northland CAP student, whether they're in an internship experience with a community partner in Liberty or in Kansas City area. Maybe they're involved in the career centers, We have a variety of opportunities. We want to continue to grow that, and that we feel like one of the most meaningful opportunities, and we hear this from our students, that they receive in K through 12 experiences are exposure to areas that they think they might want to pursue as a career or vocation. We want to try to expand that, not only for our high school kids, but also kind of embed that at younger areas, younger levels, as we try to increase opportunity and exposure for our students. So that's what that middle piece represents at the high school level. On the right side, as you look at that other document, we call that our train track, and it really sets some benchmarks as to our continued growth. So as you can see on here, we're currently at that 12,300 range, minus our early childhood kids, right? But then as we get to that 13,000, 13,500, 14, all the way up to 16,000, this has it built out to 16,000 students. Here's what we need to be thinking about as it relates to elementary. When might a new elementary school be open? Middle level, when might we open another middle level school? High school, that third high school conversation, when could that occur? From that standpoint. More importantly, what would that look like? If so many kids are having those external learning opportunities, is it a traditional high school, or does it look and feel a little bit differently than what all of us as adults have been used to over the years? The one thing that's missing here that we talk about often is dates. When's this going to happen? If you can figure that out, please let us know, because that's really the purpose in all of this work and trying to make our best educated projections and looking forward for Liberty Public Schools. The next piece is just the long-range planning projects that we identified. So from the facility assessments, the feedback at the building level from faculty and administration and staff, the community feedback that we received along the way in planning criteria, the demographic projections, all of that really impacted the projects that we started with. Each summer, you may or may not know that we conduct a variety of capital improvements and projects through our capital budget. And so we do that and kind of crank it out over the months of May through August. And so when school opens up, oftentimes there's something new, whether it's a new addition or a renovation to an entrance, various things like that. This particular document, this facility master planning document, includes at the very top there capital improvements and the big projects and initiatives that we have going on in and around those improvements from summer to summer. The second piece is just that long-range planning piece that we've been working on. And then the last piece is future projects associated with this no tax increase bond issue. So this is kind of the large look at long-range planning for Liberty Public Schools. So from capital projects, identified needs, future growth, really what we saw from the community feedback that we conducted, we started with about $120 million worth of projects. And so given that we had a $70 million bonding capacity that we could only get up to, we started the process of winnowing and prioritizing. But rather than exhausting that full $70 million worth of bonding capacity, we really landed on what we believe is a thoroughly thought out list of projects that really kind of shape us up and get us ready for that 13,300 mark like we talked about. So we went from this to that $49 million list of projects. The other thing that we did with this particular list is we put it in front of our community at a couple of additional community engagement meetings, and we had great attendance, great participation, great feedback on each of these projects. We also conducted a phone survey of our community around every single item that's on this list and got great feedback on that phone survey as well. In addition, all along the way, we've had open-ended comments and opportunities from our community, and we've gotten a lot of feedback, areas of strength, but then also areas we may want to take a look at or areas that we need to focus a little bit differently on. We've taken those comments and we've pushed them to schools and to departments to be able to look at and consider for action. This list of projects can really be broken down into three categories: safety and security upgrades, secondary projects, as well as district-wide improvements. The safety and security upgrades at Early Childhood Center, Lillian Schumacher, Manor Hill, Liberty Middle School, and Liberty North have everything to do with the front entrance. And so schools have changed. Rather than that open feel like used to be the case, we've been working over the last several years to ensure that when visitors come to Liberty Public Schools, They connect by way of a two-way camera. They buzz in, they have a conversation, and then they enter into a corridor or holding area where they're interfacing with either an administrative assistant, maybe someone from our safety and security staff, or they are funneled right into the administrative office. In addition to that, we have secure checks as it relates to scanning IDs and doing background checks before a visitor ever steps into kind of the general populace of the school system or the school building. So we're looking at trying to renovate and modify some of those entrances. We have been working on this across the district over the last couple of summers. There's another safety and security concern that exists at Franklin Elementary. That one is a little bit different. They already have the entrance structured like we would want them to have in a safe and secure environment, but they do have a modular unit that sits in the back of the campus. We'd like to get rid of that modular unit by adding on a couple of classrooms or adding on to a wing, 2 classrooms, to be able to bring students into the building and have additional capacity at Franklin Elementary. In addition to that work, there's some kitchen and cafeteria needs that are included in the projects at Franklin Elementary. The second category of projects is as it relates to secondary school. At the high school level as well as the middle level. At Liberty High School, looking to add on a theater onto the east side of campus, which we believe is long overdue given the performing arts program and the quality of work that students do and the limited space that they currently have. By putting that on the east side of campus, we'll have an opportunity to free up the 800s wing, which currently facilitates classroom space tied to our fine arts program, and be able to modify that for additional classroom space, flexible learning design, and so forth. We continue to have parking needs as that building continues to grow, and we're relatively landlocked, but have identified a couple of key areas on campus for additional parking, as well as, given the age of that building, some need for restroom renovations. Similar to your home, where on occasion you need to go in and take care of plumbing issues and just various upkeep items tied to restrooms. Liberty North is a little different. A couple of years back, we added on a wing and grew that building's capacity. We have a need to do that again based on the demographic projections that we see as that bubble walks its way up to the high school level. So an additional wing at Liberty North to grow their capacity by about 500 students, as well as additional parking needs on that campus as well. The last piece of the secondary improvements is at Heritage Middle School and Liberty Middle School. Some restroom renovations, and that Heritage is one of our oldest buildings. To upkeep that, but then also to be able to repair some issues that we're dealing with at Liberty Middle School gym with a buckled floor and an inability to kind of extract or draw out the bleachers in their entirety. So that really wraps up the secondary improvements across those schools. The third category is district-wide improvements, land acquisition, in that we have a facility and ground center that we have been leasing for a number of years and likely could have paid off by now. But we would like to take that off the books. It also has some acreage that we could expand upon in the future by perhaps consolidating some of our support services onto that site, onto that location from existing locations in the district. That then would give us the opportunity to kind of rethink how those spaces are utilized if we do that consolidation in the future. The second piece is district innovative learning environments and an allowance for that, not to exceed $2 million. We have a lot of requests to rethink the physical spaces in our schools that come from teachers and administrators. We've had opportunities to take advantage of locations in and around our community with the addition of Blackberry Commons to our school sites and creating the academy over there. So how can we think differently about learning spaces from teachers who want to do more collaboration and maybe want to install a sliding barn door between their classrooms to a nook over here that could be completely retrofitted by adding stools and counters and TV screens for kids to be able to utilize and project their projects and work in small groups. We want to continue to honor that as we think about education differently in terms of meeting the needs of our learners and instructional programming. The last piece that I would mention is just as it relates to accessibility improvements. We have some needs that we have related to ADA and compliance in kind of upgrading some of our sites. And so we want to include a project in around $425,000 to be able to do that. Again, we believe this has been a very thorough and thought out process to get us to this list of projects, a $49 million no tax increase bond issue. The other piece that we would mention, and it's again that common thread throughout, is opportunity for feedback and to engage and for awareness. We just wrapped up our community meetings. We have a couple of more civic and kind of area meetings in providing this additional information. In addition to that, we received feedback on our community survey regarding our district's performance, wanting to know how we're doing, what can we improve upon, what type of a grade would you give our school system, what are our strengths, what can we improve upon, and then finally that specific project feedback that we mentioned earlier. So that's really a recap of that journey. You can get additional information. We have a flyer. Hopefully you've seen these around the community that kind of give that recap, kind of a front and back piece regarding the election and the projects. Again, April 3rd, no tax increase bond issue. The ballot language specifically is included in this presentation. The emphasis on the $49 million list of projects, and then in the second paragraph, how that will impact tax rates within the district. So the district service levy is expected to remain unchanged at $1.3007 per $100 of assessed valuation of real and personal property. With that said, we have additional information on our district's webpage. In addition to that, frequently asked questions. Our community meetings are slowly kind of wrapping up. We've had over 70 between January and the election on April 3rd. So hopefully our community is informed in terms of the needs that the district has. And so we look forward to seeing everyone at the polls on April 3rd, and would conclude with this audience to see if there's any questions that you might have of us this morning. Any questions from the audience? We'll stick around. If you have questions, feel free to connect. I'm glad to talk with you and visit with each of you to get to know you a little bit better. So with that said, have a great rest of this week and a great weekend.